Hey guys, it's Mort here, with something a little different today. Over a month ago, I got an unusual request to make a video on hemorrhoids. I told the user that if his comment got 20 likes, I'd do it. Well, it happened. He got 27 likes. And being a man of my word, here it is. I'm going to be honest, this video is gross. So if you're easily disgusted, or not one for quite literal toilet humour, then this video is most certainly not for you. You can pause the video now, look in the description and check for some previous videos of mine which you can watch instead. Or, if you're an absolute legend and have seen all of them, then why not check out my therapeutic suggestion at the bottom. Well, that's the warning. If you're gonna pause now. And without further ado, it's time to begin. Number 1. It had to have been at least a week. My insides were so full, and bowel movements were a thing of the past. I needed to eat food, but I couldn't until I managed to go to the toilet. I went into the bathroom and tried every position and type of squat you can imagine. No go. I decided that if this thing wasn't going to come out on its own, I was going to have to take it out myself. I went back into the bathroom for supplies. My wife gave me a quizzical look. As you can imagine, I used the lubrication to do a bit of preliminary investigation. I hit a wall immediately. This was not going to be good. Due to my earlier straining, my investigatory finger was surrounded by warm, blood-filled hemorrhoids. Like the turd, they too would have to go. Now, when I say I hit a wall, I mean that I hit a wall. Its girth was tremendous, and there was no getting around this turd. Normally, if you could just grasp both sides, you could pull it out. But that wasn't happening here. It was a giant mass, and nothing in my previous turd yanking experiences had prepared me for this. As I began to realize that I would need a new strategy, my probings became too much, and the hemorrhoids popped. My right hand was now covered in blood from my finger to my wrist. I stood up and washed my hands for the first time. I had never encountered a turd this solid. I applied some more lube to my fingers and pinched out the first bit. It was a bit like shaping clay. I'm dropping the turdlets into the toilet beneath me. My hands are now both covered in blood and lube. The worst part is that I'm beginning to get fecal matter caked underneath my fingernails. I had managed to chip off enough turdlets to fill the bowl, with what a normal healthy person might consider a reasonable sized shit. I washed my hands a second time, and lubed up for the third. I flushed the toilet. I could now push the turd a little bit. There was still very little room in my arse for the turd to move or for any gas. Every time I pushed the turd, I could hear this weird suction sound happening in my arse as the turd clung to my anal walls, as the gas pockets shifted around. I went back to chipping. My wife knocked on the door concerned, and I told her not to come in, and then washed my hands again. The chipping was starting to have an effect both on the turd and on me. I could feel it move around my inside now, and I was also beginning to get a bit lightheaded from all the hemorrhoidic blood loss. I wasn't sure how much longer I was going to be at this. Then it happened. It shifted and took on a life of its own. I don't know the science behind it. Maybe the gases now had room built up behind it. But that thing shot out of me with an incredible force. It was glorious. The largest turd I had ever made, with bits of rubble that once formed its crown swimming in water, tingled red with my blood. My hands were absolutely caked in blood and shit. I washed them at least a dozen times until the smell was a distant memory. I had been gone for a good half an hour. And then it was time to eat the sandwich that my wife had made for me. Number 2. I woke up at 3 AM once and felt the gurgles in my stomach telling me that I needed to get out of my bed now. I sat on the can expecting a torrent. Nothing. I couldn't even feel anything move at all. Then another round of painful cramps and such. I squeeze, and the bottom part isn't budging at all. I finally realised that although it might be molten liquid on the top floor, its exit is completely compacted and blocked off. At this point I have no idea what to do, and I am screaming in pain with every round of cramps and upper bowel movements. Then my hemorrhoids pop, and I start to bleed. I even considered getting some kind of thin device and cramming it up there to break up the stubborn poop party in the lower deck. After about the 7th round, I feel a slight shift from the bottom as blood slowly trickles out. I know you aren't supposed to squeeze, but I was in agony, and I am squeezing with all my might, veins bulging out of my neck and forehead. I know that if this doesn't happen soon, I'm going to have to pull an Elvis and be found on the can with my eyes rolled into the back of my brain. Finally, a fist-sized piece of shit that was holding up the whole show shoots out my ass like Lucifer's hammer, en route to wipe out a whole civilization of Philistines. Immediately after that, there's a liquid fire hose party underneath. I'm pretty sure I actually lifted off the shitter by a few inches. Any harder, and I would have been knocked out by hitting my head on the ceiling. Number 3. All my life, my bowels have had a tendency to hold onto shit for 3 or 4 days at a time. It was just normal for me. I've learned to combat this with copious amounts of insoluble fibre. Anyway, one day I woke up and realised it had been 6 days since I'd last been. I felt like a girl who missed her period. I was kind of freaked out a bit. Even without having a poop, I went to the bathroom and started to push to see if there was anything I could get out. There was definitely something there, but it wouldn't budge. After several minutes of pushing and pelvic exercises, I felt some movement, so I kept doing it. Little by little I could feel something moving. Eventually it started to poke out. It was firm and solid, completely sapped of its moisture, and it was starting to hurt at this point. So I wanted to get it out ASAP. With every push it moved less and less, and pretty soon it stopped moving altogether, just barely poking out, and the thickest part couldn't get past the sphincter. It was just too massive. I stood up, bent forward, and pushed for at least 10 minutes, just trying to get past this point. It hurt the most right about now. I could feel things stretching beyond their elasticity. I couldn't take it anymore. I nearly passed out from pushing and fell against the bathroom door. I stood back up, squatted over the toilet, and with one more mighty push, I felt it cross the threshold. For a moment, I felt relief. Then the whole shit followed behind it with far greater speed as it tapered off in one giant chunk. If I had been sitting on the toilet, I would have had to stand to let it all out. The bulbous front end wouldn't even fit down the plumbing. It narrowed towards the end, which was leaning up against the toilet seat. It looked like an overgrown corn cob. I was still in pain. So I checked myself out and found 4 emerging hemorrhoids, which would plague me for the next 2 weeks. Needless to say, flushing didn't do any good. It didn't even start to go down. So as I do when I walk my dog, I grabbed a grocery bag and pulled the brick out manually, tied it off and dropped it outside in the garbage. I went inside and immediately researched ways to keep it from ever happening again. That week, I discovered Kellogg's brand buds, and I've been a regular ever since. Number 4. I've been blessed with a very shitty intestinal tract. So even with a fairly well-managed diet, weight loss, enough water consumption and exercise, I still only manage to go about twice a week. I'm known in my family and friend circles for my bi-weekly poop days. It comes on like a freight train and turns into a 2 or 3 bathroom trip afternoon ordeal. It was the worst when I was a fat kid in 7th grade. Once a week during first period, I would suddenly feel like my insides were going to split open. I'd get really sweaty, run to the restroom, and almost pass out from the pain whilst I was swearing loudly on the toilet to evacuate my bowels. It was like clockwork, and once a teacher walked in whilst I was cursing like a sailor, took my name, and called my parents. A doubly shameful day. Another time in 5th grade, it happened at a family reunion, and I remember quite vividly lying naked in the fetal position on the bathroom floor of my great uncle's rural Nebraskan house in pain for 25 minutes trying not to faint. On to the incident. I got really lazy with my diet around Halloween, which was conducive to laying around and eating all day. But when it all finally broke loose, my anus did not fare very well during the ordeal. I ended up with 5 enormous hemorrhoids. I've had them a few times before, but not yet with such intensity. They all had to be lanced and drained. This involved a nurse shoving syringes, yes, a syringe, 5 times into my arsehole to numb it. Once for each hemorrhoid cluster, and then slicing them open to drain the blood clot. Let me set the scene for you. Me, naked in a hospital gown, laying on my right side with my left leg bent up and clutched against my chest, and my free hand clenched onto my left arse cheek, helping the nurse reveal what looked like a buffet of hairy red garbanzo beans for her to slice into. I think my cries could have been heard from several doors down the hall. It was not a fun day to say the least. Thankfully, the Vicodin I was on after the rectal slashed fest plugged me up for another week whilst my anus scabbed and healed. It's only a matter of time before it happens again. Okay guys, so this is a bit of a bonus. If you've made it this far, I think you'll find this story reasonably entertaining, I hope. Number 5. This happened to a girl I know. Let's call her Betty. Betty had been dating this guy for a while. She thought that the guy was a super great guy, and one day, after a few weeks of dating, the boyfriend invites Betty over to his house to dinner and to meet his parents. Dinner was going well, and Betty was getting along great with the boyfriend's parents, when all of a sudden, she felt the need to take a shit. She asked to be excused and use the restroom, and the family told her to use the bathroom on the 2nd floor. Betty went up to the bathroom and took a truly massive shit, like something you've never seen before. She tried to flush the toilet, but the poop was not going down. It was clogged. Betty looked around for a plunger, but there was none to be found. She started to panic. She really wanted this evening to go well and didn't want to be the culprit as the one who stopped up the shitter during the dinner party, as they would definitely know that she were the culprit. In an act of pure desperation, Betty began grabbing the shit out the toilet with toilet paper to keep her from getting her hands covered in poop. She took the poop and began throwing it out the window. In her mind, she thought that she had to do anything necessary to erase the evidence. After successfully flinging out all her stool from the window, she left the bathroom accomplished and went back down to dinner. She walked smugly into the dining room to see all of her boyfriend's family looking awestruck. She then noticed that the youngest sibling of the boyfriend was looking up at the ceiling. It turned out that this family had one of those see-through sky windows on the ceiling, and it happened to be located directly below the window on the second floor bathroom. The shit she had thrown out the window had plopped right onto the sky window. Out of spectacular levels of embarrassment, Betty just left the house and went home. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you very much for listening. Well done for making it the whole way through. I know this was very unusual, but I assure you that tomorrow we're bringing back horror. That being said, hemorrhoids are horrific in themselves, and I hope that none of you ever have to go through something like that. Anyway, if you need something else to watch, there's a link on screen now for some cool videos. And remember to drop a like and subscribe, as you really won't want to miss what I have in store for you next. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.